I've spent 15 years as a geological surveyor, and I've never seen a compass do what mine did that weekend. Some things you can explain away with science: magnetic interference, equipment malfunction, user error. But when 3 different compasses, 2 GPS units, and every navigation app on our phones all lose their minds at once, that's when you start questioning everything you think you know about the world. It started as a routine camping trip to Black Rock Ridge with my 2 closest friends, Marcus and Diana. We'd been planning this trip for months, wanting to explore some of the old mining trails that spiderweb through the northern part of the state forest. As someone who studies rock formations for a living, I was particularly excited about the mineral deposits in the area. The first warning sign came during our initial hike in. I always keep my compass handy. Old habits die hard, and I noticed it spinning lazily instead of settling on north. I tapped the casing a few times, thinking it was just stuck, but the needle kept wandering like a lost child. "Hey, Marcus, let me see your compass for a second," I called out. He dug through his pack and tossed me his old military-grade Lensatic compass. Same thing. The needle spun without purpose, occasionally twitching as if pulled by invisible forces. "That's weird," Diana said, pulling out her phone. "My GPS is going crazy too. It shows us jumping all over the place." I felt the first real twinge of unease then. 1 malfunctioning device is a coincidence. 3 is a pattern. We decided to make camp in a small clearing about 2 miles in from the trailhead. The site was perfect, flat ground, close to water, and sheltered by a grove of old pines. As I hammered in the 10 stakes, I noticed something odd about the soil. Instead of the rich, dark earth you'd expect in a forest like this, I kept hitting patches of reddish dirt mixed with what looked like metal shavings. That night around the campfire, Marcus brought up the navigation issues again. "I don't like it," he said, poking at the embers with a stick. "I've never seen compasses act like that before, not even near heavy mineral deposits." I pulled out my geological survey maps, spreading them across my lap. There shouldn't be anything in this area strong enough to cause that kind of interference. Some iron deposits to the east, but nothing significant. Diana was unusually quiet, staring into the darkness beyond our fire's light. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" I was about to dismiss her concern when I saw it. A brief flash of reflected light in the trees, like moonlight catching metal. But there was no moon that night. The next morning, I woke early and decided to do some investigating. The metal shavings I'd noticed while setting up camp seemed to form a pattern. I started digging small test holes in a grid pattern around our site, something I'd done countless times during surveys. What I found made my blood run cold. The entire area around our campsite was salted with metal debris, screws, nails, bits of wire, and things I couldn't even identify. But it wasn't random like you might find at an old dump site. The pieces were carefully buried at regular intervals, forming concentric circles around our camp. Some of the dirt around them was fresh. Someone had been adding more. I was examining a handful of the metal pieces when Marcus emerged from his tent. "You need to see this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I explained what I'd found as we walked the pattern I discovered. His face grew darker with each step. "This isn't random," he said finally. "Someone's deliberately creating magnetic interference. They're trying to keep people lost out here." Before I could respond, Diana called out from the other side of camp. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. When we reached her, she was standing over a freshly dug hole. It wasn't one of mine. The hole was about 2 feet deep and perfectly square. At the bottom lay a small metal box, its surface covered in rust. Marcus reached down to grab it, but I stopped him. "Wait," I said, pulling out my phone to take pictures. "Look at the dirt around it." The soil was darker than what I'd been finding. This hole was new. Very new. "Someone dug this last night," Diana whispered. While we were sleeping, we spent the next hour documenting everything we found. The metal debris field covered an area roughly 200 feet in diameter, with our campsite dead center. The patterns were precise, mathematical even. This wasn't the work of some random woods dweller. It was methodical, planned. That's when I noticed something else. The metal pieces weren't all rusted. Some were shiny and new. I picked up a fresh steel screw, its thread still sharp. "They're maintaining this," I said, "adding new metal to keep the field strong." Marcus was checking his compass again. "The interference is stronger today. Much stronger." He walked a few steps in each direction, watching the needle. "It's like they're creating a magnetic cage." Diana had been quiet again, staring at her phone. "Guys," she said slowly, "I just checked the map. This clearing isn't on it." I grabbed my own phone, pulling up the topographical maps I downloaded. She was right. According to every official map, we were in the middle of dense forest. No clearing, no trails leading to it, nothing. The sound of a branch breaking in the woods made us all freeze. Through the trees, I caught another flash of metal, higher this time, like something hanging from a branch. When I looked back at my friends, I saw my own fear reflected in their eyes. We packed up camp in record time, leaving the mysterious box untouched in its hole. As we shouldered our packs, I noticed more fresh dirt patches around the clearing's edge. Someone had been busy while we slept, adding to their bizarre magnetic trap. The hike out was tense. Every snapping twig made us jump. Our compasses were useless, but Marcus had marked our trail with bright orange flagging tape on the way in. We followed it at a near run, only slowing when we had to check for the next marker. It wasn't until we reached the trailhead that I realized something that still haunts me. The metal debris, the fresh dirt, the mathematical precision of it all. Someone was experimenting, not just with magnetic fields, but with people. How many hikers had stumbled into that clearing before us? How many had found their compasses spinning, their GPS units worthless, only to become hopelessly lost in the woods beyond? I filed a report with the Forest Service as soon as we got back to cell range. They seemed concerned but not surprised. The ranger who took my statement asked specific questions about the metal patterns and the box we'd found. Too specific. Like they'd heard it all before. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been monitoring the missing persons reports for the area, and yesterday I saw something that made my skin crawl. A solo hiker disappeared near Black Rock Ridge. The article mentioned they found his campsite in a clearing that wasn't on any map. I keep thinking about that metal box we left behind. Part of me wishes we'd opened it. A bigger part is glad we didn't. But the question that keeps me up at night is this. Who's out there systematically turning that patch of woods into a magnetic maze? And more importantly, what are they trying to catch? Last night, I found a small metal screw on my front porch. It was new, freshly machined, identical to the ones we found in that clearing. I've triple-checked all my doors and windows, but I can't shake the feeling that something followed us home. My compass sits on my desk as I write this, its needle spinning freely, pointing to a north that doesn't exist. It was my daughter's hairbrush that first made me question reality. Not because there was anything particularly strange about the brush itself, a pink plastic thing with unicorns on the handle, but because I distinctly remembered leaving it on her bathroom counter 300 miles away. Yet there it was, perfectly placed on a fallen log next to our campsite, as if waiting for her to find it. The Sierras in October were everything we'd hoped for when planning this family getaway. My wife, Sarah, our 10-year-old Emma, and I had spent months preparing for this trip, our first real camping adventure, since Emma was old enough to appreciate the outdoors. The aspens were turning gold. The air had that perfect autumn crispness, and our campsite overlooked a valley that seemed to stretch forever. We'd arrived late Friday afternoon, just as the sun was starting to dip behind the mountains. The setup was routine tent, sleeping bags, camp kitchen. Emma was thrilled to help, proudly inflating her own sleeping pad with a hand pump. Everything felt normal, peaceful even, until that first morning. I was up early, getting the coffee going while Sarah and Emma still slept. That's when I spotted a hairbrush, its pink plastic catching the dawn light. At first, I assumed Emma had packed it without telling us, though we'd specifically bought her a new travel brush for the trip. But when I picked it up, I knew it was the one from home. It had that small crack in the handle from when she dropped it last month, and her name written in Sarah's neat handwriting on the back. "Sarah," I called softly toward the tent. "Come look at this." She emerged wrapped in her fleece, making grabby hands at the coffee pot before noticing what I was holding. The color drained from her face. That's impossible. I used that to brush her hair yesterday morning. At home, we tried to rationalize it. Maybe we'd packed it by mistake. Maybe we were confused, and this was a different brush. But we both knew this was the exact brush that should have been sitting on our bathroom counter, 300 miles and 2 state lines away. Emma woke up excited about the day ahead, completely unfazed by finding her regular hairbrush at the campsite. Kids are adaptable like that, I suppose. We decided not to worry about it. One weird occurrence doesn't ruin a camping trip. But then we found the coffee mug. It was my favorite mug, a heavy ceramic one with my college logo that permanently lived by our home coffee maker. I found it sitting on our picnic table during lunch, still warm like it had just been used. Our house keys were still on my belt loop. Nothing had been broken into. There was no logical explanation for how it got there. "Dad, look!" Emma called out that afternoon while collecting pine cones. Mr. Snuggles wanted to come camping too. My blood ran cold. Mr. Snuggles was her old stuffed rabbit, the one she'd outgrown last year. We'd packed him away in the attic storage boxes. Yet there he sat, propped against a tree trunk, his worn gray fur unmistakable. Sarah and I exchanged looks. This was beyond coincidence, beyond rational explanation. Our personal belongings were somehow finding their way from our locked house to our remote campsite. That night, none of us slept well. Every snapping twig made me think of more items from home appearing in the darkness. I kept checking that our car keys were still in my pocket, irrationally afraid they'd somehow transport themselves back to our house and leave us stranded. Dawn brought more displaced items. Emma's soccer trophy from last season. Sarah's reading glasses that she'd specifically left at home. My phone charger that I distinctly remember forgetting to pack. Each item was carefully placed, arranged almost thoughtfully around our campsite. "Maybe we should pack up," Sarah whispered while Emma was off exploring, within strict sight lines. "This isn't natural." I was about to agree when Emma came running back. "Mom, Dad, come see what I found." We followed her to a small clearing about 50 yards from our camp. What we saw stopped us in our tracks. A perfect circle of items from our house. Photo frames, books, Emma's school backpack, our throw pillows, even our welcome mat, all arranged with geometric precision. Cool, right? Emma beamed. It's like our house is visiting us. Sarah gripped my arm hard enough to leave marks. In the center of the circle was our family portrait, the one that usually hung above our fireplace. In the photo, we were all smiling at the camera. But something was wrong with the image. In this version, there was a dark figure standing behind us, barely visible in the shadows. Its outline human but somehow wrong. "Pack up, now." Sarah's voice was steel. We broke camp in record time, leaving the arranged items where they lay. Emma protested, wanting to take Mr. Snuggles and some of her other things, but we were firm. Nothing from that circle was coming with us. The drive home was tense. We called our neighbors from the road. Yes, our house was still locked up tight. No signs of break-in. No strange activity. We arrived home at dusk, and everything was exactly as we'd left it. Every item we'd seen in the woods was in its proper place, including the family portrait above the fireplace. But the photo had changed. The dark figure was gone, but now none of us were looking at the camera. In the photo, we were all staring at something behind the photographer, our expressions frozen in horror. We moved 3 weeks later. The new house is nice, closer to Emma's school. We donated most of our old belongings, keeping only what was absolutely necessary. Emma got a new stuffed animal. I bought a different coffee mug. We haven't hung any family photos. Last weekend, Emma asked to go camping again. We took her to the zoo instead. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself staring at our new family photos, the ones we've taken since that trip. In each one, if you look carefully at the background, you can just make out familiar objects from our old house, arranged in perfect circles. They're following us, those items from our old life, waiting, watching, and in the most recent photo, taken at Emma's birthday party last week, I swear I can see my old coffee mug sitting on a table in the background. The thing is, I don't remember it being there when we took the picture. I've started keeping a list of our belongings, checking it obsessively each morning and night. So far, nothing has disappeared. But sometimes, when I wake up at 3 a.m. to check the house, I could swear I hear the subtle sound of objects rearranging themselves, like furniture being moved by ghostly hands. We don't go camping anymore. Some doors once open can't be closed, and some things that find their way home never really leave. The fourth symbol appeared this morning. 6 short lines, arranged like a set of tally marks with one diagonal slash through them. It wasn't drawn. It was carved deep into our tent fabric, just above the door flap. I try not to think about the fact that whoever left it must have been inches from our sleeping faces. 6 days ago, when Maya and I first hiked into Black Pine Valley, we had no idea we were walking into someone's countdown. We'd chosen this remote spot specifically because it rarely saw visitors. The 3-mile trek up unmarked trails tends to discourage the casual camper. As an anthropology grad student studying indigenous marking systems, I was hoping to document some of the old trail markers in the area. Instead, I found something else entirely. The first symbol showed up on our second morning. 9 vertical lines with 2 horizontal lines crossing through them. Clean cuts, precise angles, carved into our tent with surgical precision. Maya wanted to pack up immediately, but I convinced her to stay. After all, I reasoned, it was probably just some local kids trying to scare the out-of-towners. At least take a picture, I'd said, pulling out my phone. It might be significant. That's when we met Parker, the local who changed everything. He had appeared at our campsite that afternoon, claiming to be checking on backcountry campers. Something about his ranger uniform seemed off, too new, too clean for someone working these remote trails. But he knew the area well, pointing out water sources and warning us about the early autumn weather patterns. Then he saw the symbol on our tent. I'll never forget how his face changed. The friendly ranger facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something dark underneath. He asked to take a photo, hands shaking slightly as he pulled out his phone. "You need to see something," he'd said, pulling up an old image. This was found at the Mitchell campsite last season, right before they disappeared. The photo showed a tent almost identical to ours, marked with the same 9-line symbol. Below it, someone had carved 8 lines, then 7, then nothing. The Mitchells, a family of 3, were never found. Maya wanted to leave right then. Looking back, we should have listened to her instincts. But Parker insisted on escorting us out the next morning, claiming the trails were treacherous after recent rains. It seemed safer to wait. That night, the second symbol appeared, 8 vertical lines. "It's counting down," Parker said when we showed him in the morning. His ranger costume was showing more cracks. The way he studied the symbol felt less like concern and more like appreciation. But we were already committed to following his lead out of the valley. Except he led us deeper in. It took us half a day to realize we were heading the wrong direction. When Maya confronted him, Parker just smiled. "There are things in these woods older than your anthropology books," he said. "Some patterns need to be maintained." We ran, left everything except our day packs, and ran until our lungs burned. Found a hidden spot to camp, using just our emergency blankets for shelter. Felt safe for a few hours, until the third symbol appeared on Maya's backpack. 7 lines. Each mark brings strange changes to our surroundings. The birds stopped singing after the first symbol. The insects fell silent after the second. After yesterday's 7-line mark, we noticed the trees around our camp had started to die, their leaves withering in patterns that echo the symbols. This morning's 6 lines came with a gift: Parker's Ranger badge, left beside the mark. The name on it doesn't match the man we met. When I searched online, using our spotty signal, I found the real owner of that badge. He disappeared in these woods 5 years ago, leaving behind a tent marked with symbols. Maya's trying to get our emergency beacon to work, but something's interfering with the signal. The air feels thick, like we're underwater. Time moves strangely. Sometimes the sun seems to stutter in the sky, jumping backward for a few seconds before continuing its arc. We found an old journal today, tucked inside a hollow tree. Its pages are filled with the same symbols, counting down from different numbers. The last entry is a jumble of frightened writing. They use the marks to open it. The counting builds the pattern. Don't let them finish the sequence. 5 hours until sunset. My hands won't stop shaking as I write this. Maya's dozed off despite our best efforts to stay awake. I keep checking her breathing. The symbols are more than just marks. Late last night, I saw them glowing faintly, pulsing in sequence. 9, 8, 7, 6. When I match my breathing to their rhythm, I hear whispers. They're teaching me something, showing me why the pattern matters, why it needs to be completed. I understand now why Parker did what he did, why all the others did too. The pattern is beautiful once you see it properly. Each symbol is a key, each countdown a door. We're not the victims. We're the instruments. Maya's still sleeping. The knife feels heavy in my hand. It needs to be sharp to make clean lines. The next symbol requires 5 perfect strokes. The countdown must continue. The sequence must be completed. The pattern must be maintained. I can see Parker watching from the trees. His uniform is gone now, replaced by something older. Something marked with symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. He nods encouragingly. Soon I'll understand everything. For more symbols to go. The pattern is so beautiful. I should wake Maya. She needs to see what I'm about to carve. She needs to understand why the counting matters. Why we were chosen for this honor. But first, I need to make the mark. 5 clean lines. Just like I was taught. Just like all the others before me. The knife catches the last light of day. The symbols pulse stronger now. 9, 8, 7, 6. The countdown continues. I am the pattern now. And soon, others will find our tent marked with symbols. They'll run like we did. Hide like we did. Until they too understand the beauty of the counting. The knife touches the fabric. Time to make our mark in the sequence. 5 perfect lines. The pattern must be maintained. Every campground has its rhythms. The gradual quiet that settles in after sunset. The way sound carries differently at midnight. The pre-dawn stillness. After 3 seasons as the overnight host at Pine Ridge Campground, I thought I knew them all. Then the silver Volvo started showing up at exactly 3 a.m. every single night. My cabin sits at the entrance to the grounds, positioned so I can monitor the comings and goings of our visitors. Most nights are predictable. The occasional late arrival, early departures for sunrise hikes, or the midnight bathroom runs. But no one drives through repeatedly at the exact same time. No one except the Volvo. I first noticed it 2 weeks into October. The season was winding down, most sites occupied by the hardy few who enjoy autumn camping. The car's headlights swept across my cabin walls at precisely 3 a.m., the engine purring quietly as it made a slow circuit of the campground's main loop. I logged it in my nightly report, more out of habit than concern. The second night, I was ready, clipboard in hand. I watched the silver Volvo glide past my cabin at exactly 3 a.m. Same speed, same path. The The windows were tinted dark enough that I couldn't make out the driver, but I caught the license plate number this time, KRY 247. By the fifth night, I'd memorized its routine. The car would appear at the entrance at 3 a.m. sharp, make one complete loop of the grounds, and exit toward the mountain road. No stops, no variations. Just that same mechanical circuit, like a clock hand tracking time. Have you seen that silver Volvo during your day shifts? I asked Maria, who handles check-ins. She shook her head. None of our registered campers drove one, and she hadn't noticed any silver cars at all. I ran the plate number through our system. Nothing. Called the county sheriff's office to check if they'd had reports of suspicious activity. Nothing there either, though Deputy Chen's voice got interesting when I mentioned the time. We've had reports of a similar vehicle up at Broken Spoke Campground, he said. Same time, same behavior. But Sarah, here's the thing. Their report started 3 years ago, stopped suddenly, then picked up at Crystal Lake 6 months later. It's like it's making rounds of the whole county, one campground at a time. That night, I waited outside my cabin. The autumn air had a bite to it, and my coffee had gone cold hours ago. At 2:59 a.m., I heard it before I saw it. The soft hum of a well-maintained engine approaching from the mountain road. The Volvo appeared right on schedule, its silver paint almost luminous in the security lights. As it passed my cabin, I finally got a clear look through the driver's side window. The car was empty. I don't mean empty like someone was ducking down or hiding. I mean completely empty. The steering wheel turned smoothly on its own as the car navigated the curve. The headlights illuminated nothing but pristine leather seats. My first thought was that it had to be one of those new self-driving cars. But this was an older model, early 2000s at best. And self-driving cars don't make dedicated rounds of remote campgrounds in the middle of the night. I followed it in my truck the next night. The Volvo maintained a perfect 15 miles per hour through the grounds, then accelerated smoothly onto the mountain road. I stayed about 50 yards back, watching it navigate the curves within human precision. 10 miles up the road, it pulled into a turnout and stopped. I parked behind it, leaving my high beams on. The car sat there, engine running, for exactly 3 minutes. Then it shut off. No doors opened. No one emerged. When I finally worked up the courage to approach, flashlight beam steady on the vehicle, I saw that thick layer of dust covered everything except the tire tracks. The kind of dust that takes months to accumulate. The windows were completely clear, though, giving me a perfect view of the immaculate interior. On the passenger seat lay a single piece of paper, a campground map from 3 years ago, with Pine Ridge circled in red. I called Deputy Chen again the next morning. This time, he told me the rest of the story. 3 years ago, a family of 4 disappeared from Broken Spoke Campground. Their car was never found. A silver Volvo, plate number KRY 247. The nights that followed became a strange dance. I'd watch the empty car make its rounds, and it seemed to watch me back, headlights lingering a bit longer on my cabin each time. I started noticing details. The way it slowed slightly near certain campsites, how the interior lights would sometimes flicker faintly, how the engine note changed pitch on particular curves. Last night, something changed. The Volvo arrived at 3 a.m. as usual, but this time it stopped directly in front of my cabin. The engine died. For 5 long minutes, I stared at that empty car, and I swear it stared back. Then the passenger door opened by itself. I didn't get in. Maybe that makes me a coward, but something told me that once you accept that invitation, you become part of its endless circuit. Another empty seat in an empty car, driving endless loops through mountain campgrounds at 3 a.m. This morning, I submitted my resignation. Let someone else watch the silver Volvo make its rounds. Let someone else wonder about its purpose, its passengers, its destination. But as I pack up my cabin, I can't stop thinking about that open door, about what I might have seen if I had accepted the invitation, about where that mountain road really leads at 3 a.m. The sun is setting now. In a few hours, the Volvo will arrive for its nightly circuit. My truck is packed, but I haven't left yet. The longer I sit here, the more I wonder, what if this is my last chance? What if that open door was offering answers to questions I haven't even thought to ask? It's 2:57 a.m. now. I can hear an engine in the distance, growing closer. The sound is different tonight, somehow hopeful, like it knows I'm still here, like it's been waiting for me all along. Maybe I'll stay just a few more minutes, just long enough to see if the door opens again. After all, every campground has its rhythms. And sometimes, if you listen long enough, they invite you to join their dance. The snow tells stories if you know how to read it. 20 years of winter hiking taught me that much. But these tracks, the ones that have been shadowing my path for the last 3 days, they're telling a story I don't want to read. A story that shouldn't be possible. It started as a simple week-long trek through the Glacier Peak Wilderness. I'd done this route half a dozen times before, always in winter when the tourists clear out and the mountains belong to those who truly know them. The forecast promised clear skies and fresh powder, perfect conditions for someone who prefers solitude and snowshoes. The first day went exactly as planned. 10 miles in, breaking trail through pristine snow, the kind that squeaks under your boots when the temperature drops below 15 degrees. I made camp just before sunset, using my usual winter setup. 4-season tent, doubled sleeping bags, and a snow wall built to break the wind. The tracks appeared the next morning. At first, I almost missed them, a single line of prints parallel to my own trail from the day before, about 20 feet to my right. Someone else breaking trail, I thought, though it was unusual to see another winter hiker this far out. But something about those tracks kept nagging at me. They matched my stride exactly. Where I'd stopped to check my map, they stopped too. Where I'd stepped wide to avoid a buried log, they'd made the same adjustment. A perfect mirror of my own path, just offset to the side. I studied them carefully, trying to identify the make of boot or snowshoe. The impressions were crisp but strange, like someone had pressed a perfect copy of my own tracks into the snow beside me. Even the depth was identical. "Hello," I called out, my voice flat in the winter air. No response, just a soft thump of snow falling from a distant branch. I packed up camp efficiently, years of practice showing in every movement. The parallel tracks disappeared under my tent, as if their maker had waited while I slept. As soon as I started hiking again, fresh tracks appeared beside me, forming in the snow at the exact same time as my own. By the third day, the tracks had become my constant companion, always 20 feet to my right, never closer or further. When I changed direction, they changed with me. When I stopped, they stopped. Perfect synchronization, as if I was casting a shadow in the snow. I tried experiments, sudden stops, erratic changes in direction, even walking backward for a stretch. The tracks matched every move precisely. But when I crossed my own trail, trying to reach the parallel prints, they would appear 20 feet to the right of my new position, pristine and untouched. The radio forecast warned of a storm coming in, but I was too fascinated to turn back. I'd given up calling out to my invisible companion. Whatever was making those tracks wasn't going to answer. Last night, something changed. I made camp as usual, built my snow wall, checked my supplies. But as I was zipping up the tent, I noticed something that turned my blood to ice. The parallel tracks had moved closer. 15 feet now, maybe less. I barely slept, listening to the wind pick up outside. Every hour, I'd check through the tent door with my headlamp. Each time, the tracks had shifted slightly closer. By midnight, they were 10 feet away. At 3 a.m., 7 feet. Just before dawn, I heard the snow crunching outside my tent. Slow, deliberate steps, circling the perimeter. The same rhythm as my own walk, but out of sync now, like an echo that had finally broken free of its source. I'm writing this from inside my tent, watching the shadow of something move past the walls. The tracks are 3 feet away now, perfect copies of my own prints, but somehow wrong in ways I can't explain. The storm is getting closer. The wind carries sounds that might be whispers or might be tricks of the mountain air. My parallel companion is still circling. Each lap brings the tracks an inch closer. Soon there won't be any space left between my prints and theirs. I don't know what happens when they finally converge. The shadow keeps passing by my tent. It has my exact profile, moves with my precise gait, but something about its shape suggests that whatever is casting it isn't necessarily walking upright. The storm will hit within the hour. Visibility will drop to 0. In wide-out conditions, tracks are the only way to find your way back. Follow your own prints home before they fill in with snow. But which prints will I follow now? The circling has stopped. Something is casting 2 shadows on my tent wall, mine, and one approaching from the other side. They're almost the same height, almost the same shape, close enough to pass for identical, unless you look too carefully at the angles. The zipper on my tent is moving. I'm not touching it. I think I finally understand what's been following me, why it needed to learn my tracks so perfectly, why it had to study every step I take. It wants to replace them with its own. The tent is opening. The thing outside has my face, but its tracks no longer match mine. It walks differently now that it doesn't need to hide. The storm is here. The snow will cover everything soon. No one will be able to tell which set of tracks led out of these mountains. No one will know which one of us made it home. I found the first trail camera 2 hours after setting up camp. It was well hidden in a cedar's branches, lens aimed directly at our tent site. I might have missed it completely if the afternoon sun hadn't caught its motion sensor just right. The memory card inside held 3 months of photos, all of our exact camping spot, all taken long before we arrived, as if something knew precisely where we would pitch our tent. "Hey, Chris, come look at this," I called to my hiking partner, keeping my voice steady despite the unease crawling up my spine. Chris and Megan were still setting up their tent 20 feet away, arguing good-naturedly about the best angle for drainage. "What's up, Jake?" Chris wandered over, wiping sweat from his forehead. When I showed him the camera, his ranger training kicked in immediately. "That's not one of ours." "Wrong model. I should explain. Chris works for the Forest Service, which is why we trusted his suggestion for this secret camping spot. A clearing most hikers miss, he'd said, perfect for a few days of backcountry camping. Remote enough to feel adventurous, but close enough to mark trails to be safe. The camera in my hands wasn't feeling very safe. "Let me see the photos," Chris said, professional curiosity overtaking caution. I handed him my phone where I downloaded the images. His expression darkened as he swiped through them. 3 months of daily photos. Same angle, same time of day. Empty clearing, except for occasional wildlife. Until yesterday, when the photos showed 3 people setting up camp. Not us. A different group. There were no photos of them leaving. "Maybe they're still out hiking," Megan offered, having joined us to see what we were discussing. But we all knew that wasn't true. The site had been empty when we arrived, no sign of recent camping. Chris was already scanning the trees. "There," he pointed then again, and there, 2 more cameras, positioned to create overlapping fields of view. We found 5 total, forming a perfect surveillance perimeter around the clearing. "We should check the other cards," Megan said. As a photojournalist, she was more intrigued than frightened. That changed when we saw the contents. Each camera told the same story. Months of daily documentation. Different groups of campers appearing suddenly, then vanishing just as suddenly. No photos of anyone ever packing up or leaving. Just there one day, gone the next. "This isn't right," Chris muttered, his ranger confidence cracking. "This clearing isn't on any maps. It's not a designated site. How did everyone find it?" "The same way we did," I realized. Someone told them about it. We started noticing other details then. Small markers on trees, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Old fire rings that had been carefully buried. A pattern emerged. This clearing had been used repeatedly, methodically, but always kept to look untouched. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows through the trees. None of us suggested packing up and leaving. That would mean hiking out in the dark, and somehow the cameras felt like less of a threat than whatever might be waiting in the night forest. We'll take watches, Chris decided, falling back on his training. 2-hour shifts. No one sleeps alone in their tent. I took first watch, sitting by our small fire as darkness claimed the woods. The camera's infrared sensors blinked steadily, recording our every move. I tried counting them at one point and realized there were more lights than cameras we'd found. Around midnight, during Megan's watch, we heard the first drone, a low mechanical hum, just at the edge of perception. It moved through the forest around our clearing, never visible but always present. Watching, waiting, Chris's watch brought the whispers. Voices just quiet enough that we couldn't make out words, having conversations just beyond the firelight. When we shone our lights toward them, we found only empty forest and more cameras we'd somehow missed earlier. My second watch, just before dawn, was the worst. The cameras started clicking, not all at once, but in sequence, creating a rhythm that almost sounded like speech. Click, click, pause, click. Click, pause, click, click. A code I couldn't decipher, but felt I should understand. Morning revealed new cameras, dozens of them, covering every angle, every approach. Some looked ancient, weathered by years of exposure. Others were brand new, their lenses gleaming. All focused on our campsite. Look at this, Megan called. She'd been reviewing more memory cards. The same people appear multiple times. Different months, different years, but the same faces. Same poses even. She was right. The mysterious previous campers showed up again and again in the photos, like actors replaying the same scene. Always arriving, never leaving. Their tents always in the exact same spots. Just like ours. Chris was the first to notice we couldn't find the trail out. The path we'd followed and had vanished, replaced by thick undergrowth that looked decades old. Every direction led to more cameras, more markers, more signs of watching. "Jake," Megan whispered, her voice tight. "Our tent. Look at our tent." The photos on her camera screen showed our campsite from this morning, except we weren't in them. Our gear was, the remains of our fire were, but the three of us were missing like we'd already vanished. Like we'd become like all the others. The cameras are clicking faster now. The drone is back, louder, closer. The whispers of words I almost recognize. Chris is studying an old photo he found wedged behind one of the cameras. It shows this same clearing, dated 1987. Our tents are in it. Our exact tents, our exact gear. But the people sitting around the fire have different faces. Or maybe there are faces, just wrong somehow. Like copies of copies, degrading with each iteration. Megan thinks she's figured out the pattern. The cameras aren't recording. They're projecting, creating. Each click is another version of this clearing, another layer of reality where different versions of us are camping in exactly the same spot. We've tried to leave 4 times now. Each attempt leads us back to the clearing, but subtle things change between attempts. The angle of the sun, the wear on our gear, the faces in the photos. I'm writing this because I found a notebook hidden under a root. It contains dozens of similar accounts, each describing the same clearing, the same cameras, the same endless loop of arrival without departure. The last entry is in my handwriting, but I don't remember writing it. The cameras are all clicking in unison now. The sound is like a heartbeat, like a countdown. Chris says we should try leaving again, but I'm not sure we'll be the same people who started this trek if we do. Maybe we never were. Maybe we've always been here, being recorded and replayed, our images degrading a little more each time the shutters click. The next group of hikers will find this clearing soon. They'll think they discovered it themselves. They'll set up their tents exactly where ours are now, and the cameras will keep watching, keep recording, keep creating versions of reality where we're all still here, still setting up camp, still trying to find our way out. Click, click, click.